Hello, good evening. This is Jean McKnight, co-chair of our Housing Plan Working Group. And let me first introduce co-chair Natasha Espada. Natasha and I both serve on the planning board. And I want to mention a few things regarding this meeting being conducted by Zoom. It is, of course, an open meeting conducted remotely, consistent with current state regulations, and is being recorded. Now, although, of course, there's public access to this meeting provided by Zoom, but that doesn't ensure there'll be public participation unless required by law. And we've had two wonderful community input sessions, but this is a meeting. It's not a hearing, and we won't be seeking comments from the public at this meeting. But for those who are participating in the meeting, members and staff, please be aware that others should be able to see and hear you, and that anything you share or state will be a matter of public record. And all supporting materials for this meeting, including the agenda, are available on the town's website, www.needhamema.gov/housingplan2021. And we always welcome written comments also. And written comments may be sent to planning@needhamema.gov with the subject line, Housing Plan Working Group. So what I will do is introduce the members of the Housing Plan Working Group and our staff. So I'll go around. I'll work off my list that has the affiliations of the Housing Plan Working Group members. Let's see now. A few of our members are not here yet, though they are expected. But I'll introduce them as they come in. But I see Ed Cosgrove, and Ed is the representative from our Board of Health. So say present when I call your name.
Okay, present.
Good, thank you, Ed. And Helen Gregory of the Council on Aging.
Present.
Oscar Mertz, who is our citizen at large.
Present.
Let's see, we do expect Michael O'Brien, who is our representative from the school committee. I'll introduce him when he appears. He did tell us that he'd be late. And Ed Scheidler, who's with us from our housing authority.
Present.
And Rhonda Spector, who is also a citizen at large.
Present.
All right, and there are a couple of members who were unable to join us tonight. Carol Fischetti, who serves on our finance committee, and Marcus Nelson, who's a member of our select board. And Dan Matthews has been a very helpful and informative member of the Housing Plan Working Group, but as a member of our select board. But Dan has decided, as you know, not to run for a select board. And so he is no longer a member of this committee and no longer a member of the select board. And the select board has not yet appointed a new member for our group. So that now let me introduce our staff. Lee Newman, our planning director.
Present.
Alexander Clear, assistant town planner.
Present.
Karen Sundberg, who is very, very much the leading staff on this project. And Karen is the town's housing Community Housing Coordinator.
Present.
Yes.
Hi, everybody.
And also Cindy Gonzalez has been very helpful in our surveys and in our public information sessions. Cindy is the town's public information officer.
Present.
And also joining us tonight is Timothy McDonald, who is the director of our Department of Public Health. Tim is not a member of this committee, but we're very glad to have his participation. The next item on our agenda is to approve of the minutes of our March 10th, 2022 meeting. Are there any questions or comments about the minutes? If not, then may I have a motion to accept the minutes of March
So
10th?
moved.
And a second? Seconded by Helen, moved, I think, by Ed Crosgrove, seconded by Helen Gregory. Any discussion? All right, we'll have a roll call vote on this. Natasha Spada,
Aye.
Ed Carsgrove,
Aye.
Helen Gregory,
Aye.
Oscar Mertz,
Yes.
Ed Scheidler,
Aye.
Cindy Gonzalez, excuse me, Rhonda Spector.
Yes.
All right, so those minutes are accepted. So the business before us is Natasha is going to lead us in a discussion of feedback on the housing workshop that we had on March 22nd. Natasha, do you want to take that on now?
Sure, Jean, thank you. So just a big picture, I'm gonna give a summary of what we heard. I know I learned a lot. I hope others did as well. And so it was really great to get all the feedback, and it was really great to see how much participation we had. And then I'd like to see if there's any other information that anyone else has or things that we missed. And to hear any feedback, I think that would be really helpful. So there were three kind of big picture topics, and they're related to the subgroups, but we heard about zoning and regulatory approaches. We heard about development and preservation approaches, and we heard about capacity building approaches. And one of the things that we heard from a lot of people was the interest in participating in the MBTA communities, and a big interest in supporting the Needham Housing Authority and seeing where there were opportunities for both. So just a couple of bullet points on each. The zoning and regulatory approaches, review and changing zoning to allow for different types of housing in different parts of town. Again, participating in the MBTA Communities Initiative, broadening accessory dwelling units, the ADU zoning, incentivizing the development of higher density multifamily housing, amending height restrictions in the downtown to add density and promote feasibility for housing, providing relief for group homes, creating disincentives for knocking down homes, adopting transfer or impact fees, easing zoning and permitting requirements for energy efficient and environmentally sustainable housing development, allowing 2-family and 3-family development by right, waiving application fees for affordable housing where appropriate, and easing parking minimums, and allowing large single-family houses to be converted to multiple units. And then rezone industrial areas to allow for multifamily housing. Under the development, and so there was a lot in the zoning and regulatory. Under the development and preservation approaches, it was supporting Needham Housing Authority plans to renovate and expand their housing units, encourage rental development using federal and state funding programs, providing additional opportunities for seniors to stay in town, promoting scattered site affordable single and 2-family home development, acquiring and develop contiguous parcels of land to promote deeply affordable housing, built multifamily housing above public parking lots and garages, and developing sites formerly used as public schools for multifamily housing. And then the third one was the capacity building. This was about inventory town-owned land and identify parcels that could be used to build more housing. undertake a comprehensive community education and public relations effort to explain the housing issues, providing clear housing goals and milestones that can be tracked over the next 10 years, and providing additional town-funded transportation options to reduce car usage and assist in mobility of the elderly and disabled. So there's a lot of really good information. And I think from this, the goal is to continue to prioritize, the pieces that we feel as a group should be prioritized in, for short term, kind of medium term and long term. So I think that's where we stand with this information. And I know that the subgroups are doing a lot of work on these things. So we wanted to see if there was any feedback. I didn't mean to go so quickly through it, but I know we talked about it a lot at the last meeting. So any feedback of something that we missed or any feedback in general from the group, was that a good way of getting together, getting, diverse information and just kind of any other feedback that you have.
I'll mention, just adding to what Natasha said, that as you know, there also was a poll sent. So we had the report of the recorders for each of the breakout groups. And then we had a poll sent to all of the participants. So, okay.
No thoughts? Okay. So then maybe that's a segue to Cindy, right? To talk about the report on the results from the workshop poll.
Great.
That's true. I wasn't noticing that was next on the agenda anyway.
Natural segue.
Yes, all right.
Do I, Alex, have the ability to share my screen? I just wanted to share the poll itself.
You are my co-host, so you should have
perfect. Okay.
all the abilities.
Excellent. So I am going to share my screen. Okay, so you all see this Polco survey. Okay, so I will hit the highlights. The town uses Polco for a lot of its surveying. The reason we've chosen this method is because it allows us to verify that the folks that are responding to the survey are in fact Needham residents. So we sent this survey to the individuals who participated in the community housing workshop itself. So we didn't do it broadly, but really targeted that group. Just pull up my notes here. So we opened the survey on April 5th and we closed it on April 9th. The survey was sent to 73 people. I will note that 73 also included members here of the working group as well as staff. And there were a few others like the Needham channel and Needham Times reporter. So not everyone would have filled out this survey, but of those who were eligible in that group of 73, we had 32 respondents. And we asked folks to give us their top 6 strategies, as Natasha spoke about. So here's what we learned. I'll quickly go over the top 6 and then, if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them. So the number one strategy that people—
Excuse me, Cindy. Okay. I was going to say it isn't moving, just in case you thought it was. Okay.
So the number one strategy was participation in the MBTA Communities Initiative to promote by right multifamily housing development in proximity to transit and to change zoning as needed to participate in that. That was the overwhelming number one, with 69% of respondents saying that was their priority. The second priority is to support Needham, the Needham Housing Authority plans to renovate and expand their housing units, and that came in at 59%, so 19 of our respondents. Number 3 was review and change zoning to allow for different types of housing in different parts of town, from modest single family homes to multifamily developments, and that came in at 41%. Sorry, this survey is not in order of, that's number 1 here. That was number 3. Number 4 was to broaden accessory dwelling unit zoning to allow occupancy of those who are not caregivers or related to the owner at 38%. And then these last 2 priorities, each were 31%. The first being inventory town-owned land and identify those parcels that could be used to build more housing, including those that might need regulatory or zoning changes to make that possible. And identify owners, what is it here? I identify owners who would be, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes, interested in developing them. And then finally incentivize the development of higher density multifamily housing. The one thing I also wanted to note is of those who responded, 100% of the respondents said that they would be interested in participating in future housing discussions. So we do have that list of folks and have the ability to easily re-engage with them.
And before we go on, and I know we want to discuss this, but I also wanted to introduce a member of our housing plan working group who wasn't with us right at the beginning. And we're glad to see you, Emily. So when I say hello, when I introduce you, and that is Emily Cooper, who is also a citizen at large.
Sorry, I'm a little late. We're a little under the weather over here, so doing the best we can.
Yes. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Pardon
All
me,
right.
Jean, you wanted me to let you know if Heidi Frail is here, and I do see her, so just wanted to mention it.
Oh, okay. Is there some way just simply by my saying right now, Heidi Frail is our new elected member of the Select Board. And I have heard rumors that Heidi Frail would like to serve in our housing plan working group. And of course, that decision is up to the Select Board and their appointing authority. If Heidi Frail would like to be moved over so that she appears on the screen as at tonight's meeting, joining Timothy McDonald, who is also, of course, he's a staff person. There is a difference. But would you please raise your hand, Heidi? We're doing it that way just so we don't put you under any pressure if you'd just rather be an attendee. So. All right, well, welcome, Heidi.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Sure.
Let me reassure you, Jean, that I spoke with Marianne Cooley and Marcus, who's the new vice chair. And the plan is to confirm me, but we just didn't get around to it because it was already a big meeting. So yes, I do hope to join you, and thanks for letting me join now.
Very good. And congratulations on being elected to member of our select board.
Thank you.
So, all right, then I give the gavel back to Cindy to just see if there are any comments in response to what Cindy presented on the results of the workshop poll.
Cindy, I didn't, the outcome of your poll, what you just showed your slides, was that in the packet?
I don't know.
Is there
No.
some place that we could look at that sort of like right?
Yeah, I will. Alex has it, so I'll ask Alex to distribute it to this. Group.
It was in the packet, wasn't it, Alex? No.
No, sorry, it's
all right.
having trouble unmuting. No, it wasn't.
But it will
But
be.
I can definitely put it on the website.
It either is or will be on our website, correct? Yes, nodding. The community housing workshop follow-up poll will be available on our website. And since others have received it, Heidi, I'll make a note that it should be emailed to you.
Thank you.
Okay. any comment from members on the results of the poll and the top 6 priorities? And then, of course, there other priorities were listed that didn't make it to the top 6, but we
Gina,
really tried to listen to everyone.
Sorry, it looks like Rhonda has her hand up.
So,
Oh, Rhonda, sorry, yes.
so that's great. It's nice that we have all this information. And I think our group got together, our subgroup got together, and with that, decided on our group is the development group, and we decided on 4 priorities within all of the priorities that we'd heard through their various things to begin to dig into. So I'm just wondering if this bigger group, I think the plan is that we're going to share what those subgroups are beginning to do. And I think the whole group as a bigger group needs to decide whether or not we've all decided on the right priorities. Specifically the ones that we've heard from others, which we heard loud and clear, and I thought that was great. And now we've as a group have gotten together and sort of decided what priorities we're focused on. And I think as a bigger group, we have to make sure that we're hitting all the right things. Is that how
Yes,
we're going?
Rhonda, when you speak of subgroups, you're speaking of the 3 subgroups that were formed and that have had their own meeting. You're not speaking of the breakout groups. Yep.
That's right.
And that's actually on our agenda, and we're going to be
Okay.
every subgroup is going to be making its report.
Okay. Thank you.
Cindy, was there anything more, any other feedback you're seeking from the members here?
Oh, that's it. I just wanted to share with this group what that particular group that was engaged in the forum cares about the most. And I know that we're talking about the next community survey, which will be a much broader group of people. And I know Karen's going to talk about that.
Yes. So that's what we're moving on to now. And the draft community housing survey. And that's a draft was prepared by Karen Borg. And, Karen is not simply an employee of the town. Karen also serves as consultant and has for many years in the housing field to many other communities, and has done these kinds of surveys in other places. And so really, when she worked this up, I very much respect her experience too, as well as the way she incorporated the ideas that came out of both of our public sessions. But now is our opportunity to comment on the draft survey that was distributed to everyone. Excuse me, I thought I had the draft survey in front of me. I must have it in my file here. Gosh, here it is. Excuse me. It is right here. So it's what I'm referring to is, it has a the Town Hill and it's Needham, Massachusetts Community Housing Survey. It has the names of all the members of the working group. And then it goes on to have all the survey questions, an introduction, then the survey questions. Would you like me to kind of go section by section as we discuss it?
Sure.
So, all right. So, we give the reason why we're having this survey, because it leads, to our preparation of our housing plan, and the background on that we're updating the 2007 housing plan and how important engagement of the community is in that process. in that this community housing survey is another means of obtaining input and mentioning that we've had these workshops as well. And then we haven't decided yet what, oh, good. Thank you for putting up. There's the introduction part. And we need to decide how much, if we finalize this tonight, assuming we finalize this tonight, then the issue is how long would we give people and when would we get our responses? Karen, do you want to talk to that now or leave that to the end? On the timing.
On the timing? Yeah, we talked about trying to finalize this and get it out next week and allow at least a couple weeks for people to respond so that we would have the results to discuss at whenever our May meeting tends to be scheduled. So that was kind of the general thrust of the timing on this.
Mm-hmm. And so we'd get it out next week and give a few weeks for the response in hopes of having the results for our May meeting, our next meeting of this group.
Right.
As far as distributing the survey, Cindy, do you want to speak to that, or Cindy and Karen, about how we'll make sure that this survey gets a wide distribution?
Sure. So I can start by just saying that instead of using Polka, which is a little more involved, we're going to use a platform like a Survey Monkey or something like that, which is much easier for people to use, and people are more familiar with that. So I think that'll just generally using a different platform will help get more people engaged. We'll do a lot of the stuff that we've done in terms of marketing and promotion for other like the forums and the working group, the community forum that we most recently did. So we'll reach out via the town's newsletter, the website, our social media. To the extent that we have media, we will reach out to the media. We'll also work with a lot of the groups that we've worked with in the past. So League of Women Voters, for example, the same sort of engagement that we've done since the beginning of this, the establishment of the Housing Working Group. So we all, at this point, I think, have our groups that we reach out to, and we'll just make sure that we do that. We'll do it a couple of times, given that the survey will be open for a few weeks. I'll work with Amy Halson in our economic development office to make sure that she sends it out to the business community. So we'll have a pretty broad reach, I think, over the next couple of weeks.
Right. And all of our members, I hope, will help with that outreach for their own committees, members, for other groups that they happen to be active with, so we get as broad a distribution as possible. And it's good that Amy Halson, who is our economic development coordinator, will reach out to the business community. And the Charles River Regional Chamber of Commerce is a very good outlet in that regard too. So then does anybody have any comment about the timing and what the outreach that we'll use before we move on to the questions? Yes, Heidi.
Hi, thanks. Cindy, would it be possible, do you think, to the group, would it be appropriate to send the survey to our town meeting member population, who now, in theory, has email addresses?
Yeah, absolutely. We've done that with our, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking it might be great to take their temperature, since ultimately this is going to move through them.
Yeah, totally. We've, with the last two forums that we've done, Teddy Eaton was helpful in sending an email out to all town meeting members. So we'll do the same thing here.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Rhonda?
My comment is about content. So if you want to still talk about process, I'll wait.
me just see if anybody else has a comment on process or
It
anybody
looks
see
like
any other.
Oscar does,
Uh,
Jean.
All right, Oscar, you know, I just see 1, 2, 3, I only see 4 windows on the right side. So
Yes.
yes, Oscar, please.
Cindy, are you able to share with us your list so we can all sort of double check to make sure we're getting it out to even additional groups if we come up with them? So you can circulate your list to all of us that you're.
Yep.
Great.
So then let's see now. Rhonda, since your comment goes to the questions, why don't give you the opportunity to ask your question or make your comment now?
Great, thank you. So I'm wondering, we've done a huge amount of work. We've had a couple of forums. This group has gotten together. And I'm wondering if the survey might better serve the community if we provide in the survey sort of some of the results that we've had, that we have certain things that we think we're prioritizing. Are we correct? As opposed to another forum where people can just sort of look at everything, which I think is very confusing for the general public, where I'm just sort of wondering if we couldn't narrow it down and say, here are the things that this housing plan, we've heard it from these 3 forums, and the housing plan, the group, the committee has gotten together, and here are the things that we anticipate prioritizing. Which of those things are important to you? And then you could even ask, have we missed anything? But I just feel like it would be more helpful to get feedback now if we're in the right direction and if we're focusing on the right things.
Karen, let me ask you, Karen Sundberg, to respond to that. We just looked at the results of the survey on the screen, and I mean the poll of the recent workshop, and would having a few pages or how would we do that? Would there be a few pages at the beginning or kind of an appendix at the end to give people that background? Any ideas on that, Karen?
Well, I think that, the intention of this survey was still to cast a wide net and to get to beat the bushes and try to get more input from folks on kind of a basic, very simple survey that would take, 5 minutes to complete and would provide some more information on the priorities that would go into the housing plan. If you wanted, I got to say that even the priorities that have come out of the process so far will probably, there's still some things that have been talked about in the town for a while that haven't really been discussed, like inclusionary zoning. A town inclusionary zoning has been discussed for a while, but it hasn't even gotten on the list because for whatever reason it didn't bring up. So I don't know if we've gotten to the point where we've received kind of information on what we've heard before and gotten some additional information. However, if folks want to start focusing in, we can do that. I see that could be useful. I think we've been trying to kind of be very open-ended on this stuff so that we're getting, there's not a perception that, we have preconceived ideas about the strategies that ultimately will be included. But if folks really want to zero in on a few and have some ideas of editing, we're certain, this is your process. So,
maybe
we'll go with the flow.
I'll make a suggestion. In the 3rd paragraph at the beginning, where we mention the March 24th workshop, could there simply be an electronic link to the survey results, to the Polko survey. And that way people who want to link to it could link. And maybe Cindy, you're the one to respond to that, if whether that's
Yeah.
possible.
Gina, I was just going to suggest that rather than add more content to the survey itself, I do think we should actually in the survey reference the working group's website so that people can go and look and see what has been done, see what the process has been to date. So we will post the results of the poll there, and then people can look at that. That makes total sense.
Okay, so the link would be, but what I want to do is, in response to Rhonda's comment, is to particularly note that if they go to the website, they can find the link to the poll that was taken as part of that workshop.
Yep.
Just some words to that effect. Is that okay?
I think that the list that we have on development or redevelopment actions are those that we have heard mostly through the Polko and the listening session and discussions of, the working group. And we're asking people once again to just kind of give their priorities so that we get a better sense of, another sense of consensus or general kind of leanings.
I think you're right, Karen, in that what Karen is saying is that in preparing this survey, she looked at the results of the prior public input and made sure to include those results in the survey. That's the idea, right, Karen?
Well, that was the idea, but these things aren't engraved in stone, and so we can make some changes.
So it's what seems to be suggested is that we make sure to mention a link to the website right on the first page here, and just a quick sentence about how the feedback or polling from that workshop is available on that website. Nothing more than that.
And Jean, I see Emily and Ed Cosgrove also have their hands up, so maybe they have some additional information.
Yes.
Emily,
I'll start with Ed.
okay.
As far as disseminating this poll, I think you should probably consider maybe using contacts through the school system, as well as houses of worship, and then some of the social organizations in town, like Exchange Club, Knights of Columbus, things like that.
Yeah, those are all groups that are on the list of folks we've reached out to. I'll circulate that list.
Yes, we did reach out to clubs that you mentioned, and I know that we got a response from one club saying this is not the kind of thing they send around, but we'll try and reach out to everybody. The Needham Interfaith Council did forward our prior communications about our programs. Emily.
Hi, thanks. So I'm sorry if I missed something. I'm a little confused about the process and timeline. So it seems like we have two parallel things going on. One is we're going to put out this survey and try and ask people, to help us sort of hone what the priorities should be. But at the same time, we have these three subgroups, which we're going to talk about, who are supposed to be coming up with our own priorities and strategies by the end of May. So I'm not sure how I dovetail those two things. Because in one area, we're looking for more input to help us prioritize, but the other area, we're already going ahead, prioritizing and developing strategies. So I'm just trying to, and maybe I missed something in the middle there, but I'm just trying to sort of align those two different things that are going on.
Emily, I have a suggestion. I assume we'll talk about how often the subgroups meet when we get to the subgroups, but I assume that they're meeting monthly. And I wonder if a May meeting could coincide with the receipt of the final polling and
So
some report.
maybe
on
I
that.
misunderstood. I thought we were responsible for getting sort of fleshed out strategies back to this group by the end of May, which assumes we've
Yeah.
already prioritized and come up with what we wanted to do. Maybe I missed something there. So I would hate to go in one direction and then we
Mhm.
get these survey results back. Afterwards, they're like, oh, that's not really a priority. That was a priority for your subgroup, but not for the town. So now go in a different direction.
Well, maybe at this point, I mean, we're talking about timing and process and for this, and Lee Newman later in our agenda is going to talk about next steps. Do you want to respond to Emily's question about coordination of these two things at the same time, Lee? And how we could
I know
manage
we,
it?
I know we talked about the work of these subcommittees being done by the end of May. And I think that's what we envision, but we don't have actually the subgroup reports scheduled formally until the June agenda. So I think we were thinking that at the May agenda, we would have the results of the survey. And then this group could maybe even talk about, after having that report, talking about what its aspirational goals were, not necessarily its strategic goals, kind of informed by the results of that survey. And then I think at the June meeting, we would ask the subcommittee members to actually report back their results with that information having been provided at the May meeting. So maybe that sorts it out.
Okay, that does seem like that would work. Are there any other hands raised at this time, or should we go to the questions?
Oscar Mertz's hand is up also.
Oscar, yes.
Just in terms of outreach, I'm curious if this group all agrees that there is some value in reaching either large employers, large institutions, those who have people who want to live in town, as another idea for broadening our outreach to get input. I know Cindy did send something to the hospital. You sent, and I think it was sort of it was very quick at the end of our discussion. And I don't know if there was enough time for people to respond to come to the 24th, because it was literally pretty quickly, it was soon before that 24th meeting. So that's one question. And then did I hear correctly that we would like to have a community meeting to go over the results and have a discussion? And was that actually put on the table as an idea?
Well, Lee can speak to that as far as timing. I think we do intend to have another community meeting, but that is to present the draft housing plan.
Right.
Yeah,
I was speaking about this group taking that up, that at the next meeting, I think there's two sets of goals. There's kind of like the broad-based goal, the aspirational goals.
Yep.
And then I think there are the specific action items or strategies that are the implementation items to get at those goals. So at the next meeting, when we had the results back from this more broad survey, we also were talking about having this group identify what you collectively feel are the aspirational goals.
Okay.
All right, good. I'm going to move on, but I don't want to ignore the presence of our other member, Michael O'Brien. And Michael was necessarily delayed by a conflict. Michael is a member who is also on the school committee of the town. And do you want to just say hi, Michael?
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Good. Glad you could join us. So I think these are all the people of all of our members who we did expect that would appear tonight. So now going, I think also that there was a part response to Oscar's question, but I'd like to ask Cindy on the question of reaching out to large employers. You mentioned Amy, our economic staff of our Economic Development Committee, and Amy Harrison as being a resource and for that purpose. And I mentioned the Regional Chamber of Commerce. How do you think, Cindy, that we will reach out to local employers?
As Oscar mentioned, I have a contact at the hospital who is usually happy to share things. The last go around, it was a little tight close to the actual event. So there wasn't enough lead time, but I can reach back out to her and ask her to share with the hospital. You know, I can talk to Amy about some of these other large businesses, but she's really the person I would rely on for those contacts.
And then we would also probably, Jean, want to also send it perhaps within our own schools with the faculty, with staff, teachers as well, so that they have access to the survey.
Well, that's excellent.
I have in for the past forums worked with the superintendent's office on getting that out to the principals to send out in their newsletters.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the principals send out in newsletters, and does
they all
that
have their own individual email lists?
And does that go then to the parents of the children?
Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's a very helpful resource.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, it sounds like we have a strategy to really have a good distribution for this survey.
Can I just ask one question to follow up on the
Yes.
idea of sending this to businesses? I'm just thinking particularly of the hospital as opposed to a business like TripAdvisor, I think. I work at a hospital and no one I work with lives near here because it's way too expensive. So I'm wondering, are we sending this poll when we're talking about bigger businesses? Are we sending this poll to employees who don't live here but would like to, or are we sending it to management who maybe would like to find employees closer to work, or just to get input? I'm just concerned that they may not actually have a range of employees who live near
The
Needham.
thought, well, I'll speak for myself. The thought was that we want to find out from people who want to live in town, but who
Okay.
can't, what their challenges they're finding. And
Okay.
then to get, deeper input. So I guess you'd have to say, do we need to quantify or qualify who's
No, I think that's
responsible?
legit. I mean, I know, lots
I
of
mean,
my
it's-
coworkers would like to live closer, so that's
Right.
totally
I
fine.
mean,
I
it's-
just wasn't clear what we were.
It's the regional challenge, right? I mean, to make us a healthy, vibrant community, our employers are concerned that there's housing that people can't afford to
Super. Thanks.
find.
We don't have a question in that regard in the survey on that particular point in the survey. Maybe we should talk about that. But of course, we have no way to reach employees. We are unless they hear about it through some means. But when we talk about reaching out, we're really talking about reaching out by email to employers through these means. So, but some way of suggesting to the employers that we are interested in the concerns about their employees finding housing, something along those lines, as we reach out. Is that possible?
Yeah, and I also think that when we outreach to the chamber, I can specifically request that if Greg's going to include it in his newsletter, that be the purpose, both understanding from employees of large employers what it would take for them to be able to live in Needham, but also to the extent that they do have employees in Needham, we'd also want to hear from them.
Okay, so I don't know at this point if we want to put the, does everybody have a copy of the survey on their desk, or they want to put the survey back up on the screen? Is there, put your hand up if you want it up on the screen. All right, it looks like we have people who do want it on the screen as we talk about it. So why don't, if you could put that back up, whoever is handling that kind of technical thing. Alex, okay. So we have, I'll give a sort of overview and then we can go to the particular questions. We have, please provide your perspective on the following questions. And there are 7 sets of questions. And then we ask for demographic information on the people answering the questions. So we start with, on providing perspectives, open-ended questions. The first one, how would you rank the importance of affordable housing to the Needham community from a low of 1, non-important at all, to a high of 10 at utmost importance? Now, that first question, Karen Sundberg, is that just intended to give a number response? The way it's got a couple of lines to write something in, it implies that you might say something more. What is intended there?
Well, to get a sense of how people, how people feel about the importance of affordable housing to the community.
Right, but do you want an answer that's just a numerical answer?
It's a numerical answer. There are opportunities for open-ended, we have comments.
Yes, there certainly are. There certainly are.
These
Okay.
polls, once again, it is obviously easier to get the tabulation, quick results when you can, limit some of the open-ended comments.
And the next 2 questions, as you said, go to the open-ended comments. What does affordable housing mean to you? And we do try to limit people to a short response.
Right.
And then what do you think is a reasonable housing goal? Something aspirational to strive for in the years ahead. So these are the 2 really open-ended questions.
Yeah, and you can understand that there are echoes of this from the community housing workshop, and we're clearly trying to get at the same information through a different vehicle for those who might be willing to do a short survey instead of to attend a meeting. So these are kind of key issues that we would like to get input on.
And then we get into the check boxes. And the first one, number 4, what do you think are the greatest challenges? And I think it's clear from the answers that what's meant by challenges is barriers, things that make it hard to produce more housing in our town, especially that housing that is that preserves housing affordability. So we've got this list. I don't know if people want me to read it or you can see it yourself, and any comments that you want to make on that list. And I can't see everyone in their hands.
I see, it looks like Emily and Oscar have their hands up.
Emily, you're first.
Okay, thanks, Oscar.
Emily. Okay.
And mine is hopefully easy. I might suggest that we switch questions 1 and 2. So is that what you were going to say, Oscar? Because if you say, tell us how important affordable housing is to you, but we don't actually know what they mean by affordable housing. So maybe we ask them first, what do you think affordable housing is? Then when they say how important it is, we know what they're talking about.
Yep.
So I think that's, because I would just reverse them.
That's
And then
right.
I would ask if we do need to do anything here to assist in the definition, unless you don't want to actually assist and let people answer that without any assistance. But I think this is we've been kicking this around for a while, right? And Dan started with trying to figure out how we define the 2 things. It's affordable, meaning it's subsidized housing. And then there's the affordability issue, which is market housing, right? So are we trying to distinguish here, or are we talking about affordable housing, meaning subsidized housing for people with, lower AMI? if and all the way up to 80, I guess you can go up to 100% AMI, but it's a very general, and it's also been confusing to a lot of people. So I'm just wondering if we shouldn't throw a definition in there or two. I'm just curious what this group feels.
Where would we, if we were to put something like that, for example, we do have some explanatory material on the first page about our affordable housing plan, producing affordable housing, adding, units to the SHI. And then we talk about the unprecedented housing prices. I wonder if there's a sentence, and Karen, I might ask you about just in that paragraph, a sentence that just says something about affordability is often used in two ways. One is that the market price of housing, whether it's rental or ownership housing, is very high, and the other is housing restricted to persons at or below a certain income. I'm making that sentence too long, but just the idea of putting something in right there to give just the briefest of explanations. Does that make sense, Karen?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. All right, then let's, is that responsive to your concern, Oscar?
Yes, it is. And then we're basically asking people, what does affordable housing mean to you? So I guess what we're really trying to do is figure out how sophisticated or how people really do divide this up in their own mind. There's issues of affordability, which are broad. And we know that's an issue that we're going to address with MBTA, is sort of addressing that, right? We're creating more choice, more housing choice. And then there's the NHA and the goals there. And that's obviously slightly different, but it's equally valuable and valid and important. So I guess I would say it's good to have definitions, make them brief, and then go ahead and ask people to see what they think.
So the idea of reversing 1 and 2,
Yes.
is that generally acceptable?
Yeah.
Okay, so then we get to the bullet points and the greatest challenges. And do people think there's anything that needs to be added to this list, or anything on the list that really doesn't belong there? No, that's not a barrier. Or do we move on?
Cindy, could you reshare it, or whoever was resharing it before? Oh,
Right.
you're
Alex
on
dropped
mute.
off. She was sharing it, so I have to find it and I can share it.
Okay, thank you.
It's going to take me a minute if you guys want to keep going.
I think Lee's sharing.
All right, it's on the next page, number 4. Greatest challenges. There we go. And some of these are things that people mention when multifamily housing is discussed. People mention, well, is this going to burden our schools? Do we have capacity issues? What about water supply, stormwater disposal, infrastructure issues? And people often speak of the capacity of the roads, there'll be too much traffic. That's what we're kind of putting these issues right here so that people can check them if that's what they think are the most important things and concerns they have. And then, of course, the other. And people think it's a good list, and we're all set with that.
These are the usual suspects.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Oh.
All right, then the best locations for housing development. And as Karen said earlier, this was developed after hearing from people in a prior listening group and workshop. but also it's here to throw out really all of the possibilities in our town of where new housing development could occur. And of course, what we're really talking about, of course, is places where there probably would need to be rezoning if we were to encourage new housing development. So we've got our business areas, kind of our spine, that being the Highland Avenue, Chestnut Street, Great Plain area commercial corridor. And then, from Newton to Needham Junction. And of course, this third one goes to the MBTA communities guidelines, act and guidelines in proximity to commuter rail stations, but also, of course, it's common sense that we would want housing to be in proximity to commuter rail. Then we have our industrial areas. Some of these industrial areas are kind of stuck in kind of odd places, and often close to or across the street from residential areas, probably because at the time the zoning was done, they had been developed for industrial purposes, maybe way back to 1925. But we do have a lot of small industrial areas around town, and then we have the larger industrial areas. Then, of course, our town center, our general residence district, and some people, it's certainly been commented that general residence allows 2-family. Should it be boosted to 3-4 family, 4-family, something like that? What about our single residence districts? Should we focus on our single residence districts and rezone any areas for higher density housing? Or, not even necessarily change our zoning but look at some of the areas that are now zoned at 1 acre. Should they be zoned for 10,000 square feet lots? Like our one half of town is 10,000 square foot, the other half is an acre. There was a zoning bylaw amendment proposed to town meeting a year ago for a rezoning along those lines in Hunting Road. So there are a lot of ideas there. And then if any of you have kept up with the plans for Housing Authority renovation and possible reconstruction, of course, Ed Scheidler knows all about this. A couple of the Housing Authority sites have undeveloped land as part of the land that they own that could be developed to a higher density. And then they have these small bungalow houses that could be redeveloped into 2 families. A bunch of them were done like that 10, 15 years ago that could be done now. So I just go into that kind of background to give you a more flesh out what's on this list. Is there anything that isn't on the list that should be? Is there anything that's on the list that we should take off?
So I'm not sure you're going to get exactly what you're looking for from this question, because it really goes back to what Oscar was saying about what are we talking about for affordable housing. So if I'm sitting here and what I'm concerned about is that the next door house got torn down and then they're going to make another big house. And I'm looking at this list about the best location for new housing development. I'm thinking in my head, single family home. So I'm going to be looking at these places and saying, well, that's not where you'd put a single family home. And that's not a place where you'd put a single. Or are you thinking, oh, we need to build more multifamily properties? And where might those fit? So I'm not sure what you get. What you get is going to be based on what people are thinking of, unless we steer them and say, the best location for a new apartment building might be, or for duplexes might be, or for smaller family homes. I mean, you could make this, if you wanted to, into a little table where you had different types of housing and they could check off, these might fit in those kinds of neighborhoods. But I think as it is generally right now, we don't know what you mean by housing development. And so depending on how I'm interpreting that, I'm going to give you a different response for each of those
Mhm.
areas.
Mhm. Karen, would you like to respond to that? Karen Sundberg, that was Emily speaking, wasn't it? I'm not seeing everyone.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. On fine tuning that question 5 into best locations for new multifamily, and then define that as 3 or more units, which is the typical definition. And then something, I don't know,
yeah, what do other
higher
people think
higher
about it? They
density,
think-
single family development would be the option as compared with multifamily development, would it be? But go ahead, Karen, please respond.
No, I'm curious about how other people feel about that and, what changes specifically they would like. I'd like to avoid a table because it can get complicated. But if there's a way of better specifying. The other issue that was raised, and curious to get people's input, is somebody suggested that if we're going to include specific districts, we should include a map that shows those districts.
Yes.
My concern about that is that when you put a map like that into the survey, it could get very difficult to see and could be frustrating, and people would just say, I'm done with this. Might it be better for us just to have general locations instead of specific districts? I know, Jean, you want to get at the specifics, but that's something that this working group can work off of. But I see the rationale for including a map if we're including specific districts, but I'm wondering if there was a way of being broader about the general locations. Maybe we do say multifamily development. Although, there's ADUs, there's cluster housing, there are other housing types. So the issue is to get at Emily's comments, to get at this map issue without making this very cumbersome to get at. I think location, the question itself is important because the devil's in the details. And location is part of those details. But I'm curious to get feedback on just what I offered.
So are the locations too specific?
Yeah,
And without a map, people won't know what we're talking about.
right.
And we can't really reasonably include a map. We could, again, have a link and mention the town zoning map is available at, if you wish to consult or just refer to it, if anybody wants to look it up. But the alternative would be to just be more vague. Could you give suggestions for how you translate these categories into something that was more general, Karen?
I'd really want to confer with, I get, folks' input and Lee's and Alex's input, but we probably could do, business areas and in general, or proximity to commuter rail stations would be fine. Town center is fine, people know that. Single family residence districts, people know generally that. Undeveloped land at existing public housing, I think people generally know that. But I'd be, interested in the input from the working group about suggestions.
Well, general, I think general residence district could be 2-family housing development. Another area could be the Highland Avenue, along the Highland Avenue, just basically along Highland Avenue, running from the Newton Towns, along the entire Highland Avenue corridor.
Yeah, I can see ways we can do
Yeah.
that without necessarily referring to all of these zoning districts. So
Yep.
is there general, does anybody wish to speak about that? Or is there general support for the idea that we should be more general in our descriptions? And then I don't want to forget the other issue Emily raised, and that is when we say new housing development, we should be clear what we're talking about in this survey. And there may be two different categories: multifamily housing and more dense single family and two family housing. I don't know if more dense is the right word, but
Gene, Oscar has his hand up also.
yes, Oscar.
Yeah, I don't want to get too complicated here too, but I do think we would want to specify those two. I like the two categories. I like, you say, minimal density increase, to 2 or 3 family, and then multifamily, meaning 3 or more, right? So you're really saying there are two kinds of additions to the density, and those could occur in all of these different locations or wherever you think they could occur. But I think it's helpful if you have the distinction, because if you just put multifamily in there, people will jump to the conclusions that it's bigger projects, when in fact we really do want to get down to the level of maybe you're just making something 2 or 3. And then,
So if you unless there's any other comment, I guess what I say, we hear that we should have 2 categories, one for multifamily and one for single and 2 family at perhaps a higher density, and make sure we're clear about what that means, and then have some bullet points under one and some, and maybe there's some duplication too, and in our bullet points be more descriptive about the kind of area we're talking about, and not just relying on reciting names of zoning districts. Can we assume that Karen hears us, and we can go ahead and manage that?
Yeah.
And move on now?
Yeah.
Right.
so
Right.
I have one final thought, and maybe this is, I hope it's not making it more complicated, but if you were to list, as you say, simplifying the industrial areas, maybe don't mention them, just talk about industrial areas or business areas, and then in parentheses next to each of those, and they shouldn't be very long, they should basically be 2 or 3 words. In the parentheses next to them, you put in 2 to 3 family and then multifamily, so that you could target, for instance, in the single family residence, you might just say 2 or 3 family, and you wouldn't be putting multifamily and single family. I don't know, is that getting too complicated?
That's another option, rather than having, 5A and 5B. You'd have this similar to this list, but 2 boxes under each location. Is that your concept? You'd have 2 boxes
Yeah.
under each location?
Yes,
Yeah.
that could work.
Do you think that would work, Karen and Cindy?
Is that getting too complicated?
We'll make it work.
You've heard
Okay.
enough on this. That's enough on this question, right?
No, I mean, I think that we get the general gist,
Yeah.
and it's like putting together a little puzzle, and we'll try to get at the concerns and to make this a little bit clearer.
So the next question, number 5, is talking about, well, what type of housing do we want?
Oh, it's numbered wrong.
And
Oops, sorry about
that's
that.
correct, right? That should actually be 6, 7, 8, 9. which
Yeah,
should be
it's
doubled up on
numbered.
5.
Sorry
Yes.
about that. I hate when that.
Oh, yeah, I just noticed that. 6, okay.
We'll correct that.
So this is, the various things we've heard from people about what we need in our town. And we have had a lot about there's a greater need for special needs group homes. And we recently got some correspondence about the need simply for subsidized housing that's available for disabled individuals within walking distance because, you know, people who are slightly intellectually disabled generally don't drive, but they often live relatively independently and can walk to jobs, can walk. And so, but their needs are probably covered by other categories that we have here. So, oh, anything we're missing in the types of housing units we need? Okay,
Yeah,
any hands?
one thought, can I just throw this out there? I would think if this is the new 6, I think I would flip 5 and 6. Because I think people want to actually think about what kinds of housing that we should be focusing on and then where.
You know, Oscar, that sort of popped into my mind as I turned to the page. What do you think of that, Karen? Do you think that
That
would
sounds
work?
good.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe you had it subconsciously in mind when you gave the wrong number there. Okay. So this becomes 5 as we go back to the prior page and call that 6.
Yeah.
All
That's
right.
good.
So then who are the people who need this housing? That's what question, which really should be number 7 is, what target population? We do list disabled individuals because we did get a lot of response. Hey, do you hear the thunder? So, and we have municipal workers, we have those employed in Needham, we have seniors, very low income at the different income levels. It's interesting here, we have those income levels that it was said that we should make sure we have. They're right here. Yeah. Anything else? That seems pretty comprehensive. Is that good?
May
Is
I-
it good? Move
May
to
I just
8?
jump in for 1 second? Since you have
Yes.
that table with the housing income limits, did you, at the very beginning, I think the first question was, what does affordable housing mean? Or maybe it was the second question. Would that help to illustrate if that were higher in the survey?
What do you think of that, Karen?
I think it might be.
Moving, as long as we have the table anyway,
Yeah.
moving it up.
Yeah, that works.
So should the table on that's page 4 be moved up? Okay. That's a good comment, yeah. All right, so then we go to.
Heidi, are you suggesting that the question goes up too, or just the
No.
table?
No, just the table. When we talked, you asked
Yeah,
about like broader definition of what.
Yeah, I think just the-
housing needs in the first page.
Yeah,
Okay.
just the
We'll
table,
just
because
include it there.
Okay.
what does affordable housing mean?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That works.
That question is already there. It just needed, people weren't sure if people would know what that meant. And I think that table illustrates it.
Is this Rhonda speaking or Emily speaking? Or,
Sorry, that was me, Heidi.
I think that was
oh,
Heidi.
Heidi, okay. I'm not seeing who's speaking. I'm taking minutes and so.
No worries.
So, yeah, we should, I guess, say our names when we start speaking for the public too. So now we move to important development actions, which really is number 8. And these are the, what do we do about this? We've already talked about where, we've already talked about what the needs are. And this gets into the very particular strategies. I'll make a comment myself, Karen, if that's okay. I noticed that in the top 6 priorities list that Cindy listed resulting from the polling after the community workshop, number 5 was inventory town-owned land and identify those parcels, et cetera. But that's not listed among these development or redevelopment actions or strategies. And since it was a top 6, I wonder if we should list it.
You know, we certainly can list it. Part of the reason I hesitated is that there really isn't much out there. I mean, as far as an inventory, we've gone through this in the 2007 plan and back, that is, you know, it is very limited. But we can certainly add it.
Well, there are parcels that are town-owned that are facing redevelopment of some kind, such as the Hillside School site, the Emery Grover, where the lease is going to be up in just a few years, and thought has to be given to its continued use for affordable housing and redevelopment of that site. And I think there, you know, there may be other sites. I only mentioned school sites, and maybe Michael O'Brien wants to say something about that. But since I only say because it was mentioned, we should include it, you know, in the list.
We can add it. That's not a problem.
All right, then. Any other comment on this list of strategies?
Yeah, Oscar, you want to go first?
No,
this
go,
time?
you go, Emily, go.
So this is Emily. I just wondering if there was any thought of, when we do things at my job, for example, we pilot the survey first and we give it to a few people to just see if what we're thinking the questions meant or what the questions mean. And this particular question, you know, I'm just a little worried that if I gave it to somebody who's not involved with Needham staff, who's not involved with housing, who does not know what a multifamily, and has never heard the word multifamily, will they be able to, is this basic enough for them to be able to understand, you know, what they're checking off? So I guess I would encourage us to look at the language, make it as easy as possible, but then maybe run it by somebody who, you know, your spouse or something who knows nothing about this, and see if they know what these things mean. And if not, then we just need to make them a little bit more simple.
Karen or Cindy, do you want to respond to that? How would that be done?
I got to say, for the questionnaires and surveys that I've done with municipalities, that hasn't been part of the process. But I don't. You know, I don't know. Maybe a few of us who live with people could see if people understand. I don't know. Cindy, you have any ideas? Lee, what do you think?
I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's worth showing to some people who are not in this world, and those are the types of people we're going to be asking to fill out the survey. So, yeah.
Can I have a terminology or language question, edit question on the established disincentives for knocking down homes through moratoriums or transfer fees? I'm just wanting to maybe not dial it down, but I was going to say, so I don't think that's all the options. And so I think it's a little misleading, or it's leading. I would say maybe control strategies instead of disincentives for knocking down homes through maybe moratoriums, design review. So here's what Wellesley's doing, right? The large house review is a mechanism for setting a threshold so that if you go over a certain size, then you do kick into the large house review, right? So I'm just wondering if we just maybe make this less.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I had a little difficulty with how this language, I kind of took it.
Okay, so you know what to do.
So
okay.
I think we ought to be, and I like the idea of trying to kind of
control strategies makes it
control strategies to limit tear down activity, period.
Right.
Very good. Very good. Okay. I had one idea about a test group, but maybe that group would be too well informed to be a good test. And I was thinking of the same people who did the poll recently. Do you think that it would be a good test or just more of the same as far as they're concerned? Karen?
I think we got to do a smaller sample.
Yeah, and also quickly, because we don't want that to delay the process.
Yeah, I just mean 3 or 4 people. I don't mean
Yeah.
hordes and hordes. I just mean, I think we need to give it to somebody who doesn't do this for a living. Like, I think whole, like, by right, like required by right is, you know, might be, even though it says not by special permit, that might, people might not understand what that means. If I've never had to go and do something with the planning board or zoning or anything like that, I don't really know what that means. Those are just the little nuances.
You just give a few people the opportunity to help us with the survey by answering it.
To reality check it.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
And have them take care of that pretty quickly so we get the survey done. So are there any other hands raised? Anybody else? All right, then. We've finished the heart of this survey then, as far as giving feedback to Karen, and as far as the outreach, giving feedback to Cindy. And these are the questions that we ask of the people to identify themselves. Do they own or rent now? And if they do own or rent, you know, do the owners own a single family home, a condo unit, a 2-family home, and then renters, et cetera. And then, so we're really, you know, I mean, it was said, Oscar said, I think we should reach out and have people answer this who don't live in Needham, but were employed in Needham. And we don't have, we have a question that identifies whether people live in Needham? No, we don't, because we assumed that everybody answering this lived in Needham. But I think we really should have a question on whether people live in Needham or in some other city or town, right? I'm asking.
Yeah. So in other words, it could be a question: if you do not live in Needham, do you feel you do you want to? I don't know if it's that simple, but you want to be able to get an answer, I think, so that we know.
Yeah, maybe just a simple, maybe what, since we're talking about employees, are you employed? Are you employed in Needham? And then under that, do you already live in Needham, or do you live elsewhere? Would that take care of it?
We can just create a question that says, identify yourself as one of the following. I live in Needham, I work in Needham, or, you know, check all relevant boxes.
Right.
Oh, so then,
I want to live in Needham.
I would like to live in Needham as well. Yeah.
I'll just say on the demographic information, those are questions I probably would not make a required question to fill out this survey, because there will be people who are not comfortable answering those questions. And I think you still want to capture what their views are. So just so this group knows, it might not perfectly align the number of respondents to the substantive questions with the number of respondents to the demographic questions.
And Cindy, do you think it's a good idea to tell people that it's not required? We save the information.
They'll know it. They'll know it when they start to click through the survey, whether or not they have to. It'll be clear in the survey language.
Okay. All right. So with the exception of finding out if people work here, then the other questions, are there any comments, additions? No, we don't need that. What response?
I was frozen for a while and I had to get back on, and
Karen, I can send you a note.
can you send me? Yeah,
yeah.
so because I want to make the changes in the survey, and I missed some good stuff, I'm sure.
It was just one question. I'll send it to you via email.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, and again, I don't know how other people seem to see hands, and I can't see any, but is there anybody who wishes to comment on the demographic questions? or are we all set now? And Karen will be revising the survey with the input we provided.
Jean, is question number 9 the only demographic information question?
Well, I guess I think of all, no, the whole thing is a question of, then it goes on to question number 10, how long have you lived in Needham? And then I realize we need renumbering.
Yeah, I
Then
think
do you, go down the screen. Yeah, maybe we didn't go down the screen and showed people all the questions. Right. So we have, how long have you lived in Needham? Do you think you might move out of Needham at some point in the future? Why might you move out of Needham? Then categories of age. What kind of a household are you? And there's various categories to check. And we tried to get, and on that, we tried to get in, because people often speak of empty nesters. So that may seem like kind of a strange category, but there's a way of checking that off. Because that does seem to be something that people often speak of as a need.
Jean, I didn't see anything on race and ethnicity on this. Is this something that we're interested in asking people, or is that something that's inappropriate for this type of a survey?
Well, Karen, you've done a lot of these surveys. Do you want to respond to Natasha's question about whether we should be asking about race and ethnicity?
You know what, I think it's a perfectly legitimate questions, as long as you make sure it's optional. I can say of the communities that I've worked with in the past, it didn't come up.
If they probably, I mean, I'm speaking with my Nuari hat, they probably weren't very diverse and the representation probably didn't question it, right? So I think it's important to understand, you know, who is responding to this and you know, kind of what demographics are we looking
Yeah.
at?
We can definitely add a question on that.
And how do you, the reason I think it's a good idea to have it is then when you get the survey back, you find out if you reached out to people of various races or if it's, or if you didn't. Is that the part of the reason?
Yes, I think that would be really helpful
Yeah.
because they're usually underrepresented.
Crucial.
To ethnicity, I mean, do we care if people's grandparents are German or Irish or, I mean, how do you express
Right
that?
now with Nuari, we have, there are polls in town for race and ethnicity for minorities. So I think it's more of, you know, if the majority is answering this, can the minority also, you know, can we make sure that there are some minority representatives? So that's why I think it's important. And some people don't want to put what race and ethnicity they are, but
That's right.
give them an option is really important because I would be proud to say that I'm representing a group. And if there are some groups that aren't represented, we have to reach out in a different way and we have to make them feel welcome and included.
Well, the techniques that Nuari has used and the words that they've used on their surveys, perhaps Karen can have access to that, or we can figure out what's good wording for that.
We can figure, I mean, it's in a lot of different surveys, so we can, I can help with that.
Okay, good. So it sounds like we're all set then. Thank you very much for this input, and this survey is going to be very important in our process.
Yeah,
So-
thank you, everybody, because I think that the comments will really be a big benefit, and I appreciate it.
So then we're finished with so reports from subgroups. Why don't, let's see, we have the capacity, does someone want to report on the capacity building subgroup?
So that's my subgroup.